More potential legal trouble for Donald Trump. A third indictment could be on the way. Hello, I'm Mike Walter, sitting in for Rina Naidu, and this is The Heat. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has been told that he's a target of the criminal probe into the January 6th riot in 2021 at the U.S. Capitol and efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Target letter from Special Counsel Jack Smith comes as federal prosecutors and Trump's lawyers met in a Florida courtroom for a pretrial hearing on the classified documents case. CGTN's Nitza Soledad Perez has more in this report.
A defiant former U.S. President Donald Trump reacted to the news that he's a target of a grand jury criminal investigation led by Special Counsel Jack Smith during a Fox News town hall in Iowa Tuesday night.
I got the letter on Sunday night. Think of it. I don't think they've ever sent a letter on Sunday night. And they're in a rush because they want to interfere. It's interference with the election. It's election interference. Never been done like this in the history of our country, and it's a disgrace.
Earlier in the day, Trump had revealed on his Truth social media site he's been investigated for his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, which effectively means he may soon be charged. And if he is, it would be his third indictment. Trump's former White House lawyer says Smith's notification is a serious development.
Look, it shows that there is a degree of legal jeopardy coming in the direction of the former president. And that's always serious for anybody who receives a target letter. So I do think, it's something that needs to be taken seriously. Perhaps an indictment is on its way.
Trump did not publish a letter, and the Office of the Special Counsel declined to comment. Trump's legal team has yet to formally respond to the invitation to testify before the grand jury, which the letter provides, but it's largely expected that Trump will decline to appear. His Republican allies rushed to his defense, saying he's being unfairly targeted, despite not having seen any of the allegations.
Well, I guess under a Biden administration, Biden America, you'd expect this. If you notice recently, President Trump went up in the polls and was actually surpassing President Biden for re-election. So what do they do now? Weaponize government to go after their #1 opponent. It's time and time again.
Many Democrats welcome the news.
There's little doubt that former President Trump was very specifically and granularly involved in trying to overturn the results of the legitimate presidential election that he lost.
Meanwhile, on Tuesday, Trump declined to attend a pretrial hearing in Fort Pierce, Florida, regarding the trial date to face charges he mishandled classified documents and obstructed justice. His co-defendant, his valet Walt Nauta, however, did attend. The judge, a Trump appointee, signaled she will likely delay start of the trial beyond mid-December, but appeared to push back on a defense argument that Trump could not get a fair trial while running for president. Trump, a presidential candidate for the Republican Party, is using this likely indictment for campaign fundraising. His team believes that this case has helped him with the party's base, painting him as someone persecuted by the Biden administration. Nitza Soledad Perez, CGTN, Miami.
There's a lot to talk about. Let's get right to our panel. Adolfo Franco is an attorney and Republican strategist. Joseph Williams served as a senior editor with U.S. News and World Report. Also with us is Rina Shah. She's a political analyst and commentator. And Jeffrey Swartz is a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. He's currently a professor at Western Michigan University's Cooley Law School. And Jeff, why don't I start with you? Former president could be indicted again a third time. Give us an idea of what's the meaning of this target letter. I mean, what's included in it? What does it mean? Does it mean he's going to be indicted, likely to be indicted? How do you read it?
Well, it doesn't necessarily in most cases mean you are going to be indicted, but I think that it's fair to say that Jack Smith sent the letter to let Donald Trump know he was going to be indicted. It was an invitation for him to appear within the next 3 days now before the grand jury to try to testify and explain the information and the evidence that Jack has in regards to the offenses that he enumerated in that letter. He enumerated 3 specific charges. One of them was 18 U.S.C. 371, which is a general conspiracy to defraud the United States. One was a wire fraud, possible wire fraud charge. That is for taking contributions and not spending it on what he says he's going to spend it on. And the last one was generally, as it was enumerated, appears to be a witness tampering, but I'm not sure it's the kind of witness tampering that we've been talking about. We're still trying to figure out exactly where he's going with that particular statute. So that's what he's looking at, but that doesn't mean that's all he's looking at. It means that there is an indictment coming, I would say within the next 10 days or so, and that does not mean the investigation will stop or that there won't be a superseding indictment with more charges in it as people are basically brought forward and agree to testify before the grand jury. And there's a number of those people out there.
And you said within the next 10 days, so you already jumped to my next question is when are we likely to see this actually happen? But let me ask you this, if I'm the defense attorney and you've been in that role in the past, am I more nervous about this case or the classified documents case, or am I just generally nervous altogether?
Well, I'm generally nervous altogether because it's pretty hard not to be nervous or concerned when you're looking at the potential and probably the reality of 4 indictments for sure, and then more to come. It's just going to continue to pile on, and it becomes difficult to continue to represent someone and work with several defense teams to try to coordinate a strategy. So I'm kind of nervous, and I don't like the fact that some of these offenses will carry very heavy prison time upon conviction. And for those who are concerned, yes, there is a mechanism if Donald Trump is convicted to imprison him.
Adolfo, let me get your sense of what you think of these 3 statutes. And as Jeff pointed out, we really don't know what's coming if there's an indictment and what's going to be in the indictment. But with just these 3, your thoughts on that, and then also the venue. It's not going to be in Florida this time around. It'll be in Washington, D.C. What do you make of that?
Let me start with the venue. The venue is a stacked and awful venue in terms of getting a fair trial in Washington, D.C. or New York. Washington, D.C., for the viewers to know, votes about 96% Democrat, and it's very hard to find one Trump supporter in the Washington, D.C. area. So that in and of itself, I think, tells you how this has all been political persecution. There's legal arguments. There are legal arguments here, of course, but they're intertwined with the politics of it. These are all Democrat prosecutors. These are all persecutions. The Bragg, the worst one, the most obvious one, the guy running, saying he was going to get Donald Trump as a basis to even win his position to prosecute. So the politics here is very, very clear. You have to contrast this. I'll get to the moment on this, what's going on today that you're not talking about, which is a whistleblower discussion on Capitol Hill on Hunter Biden and how the Justice Department behave very differently when it had with the Biden family, how it slow walked this process, whistleblowers coming into this, and a very clear weaponization and persecution of the leading Republican nominee for the Republican nomination, while the other matters involving Democrats are conveniently, at the best, slap on the wrist, if anything. So this is just a confirmation of that. I won't speculate, unlike Jeffrey, because I haven't seen the indictment. But I would say this: if the indictment doesn't produce or is not based on anything else that other than what came from the January 6th report, the Democrat report from the January 6th Commission, it's going to be a very, very hard road here for the prosecution, because I don't think there's any basis to charge the president with anything at all. And I don't see anything new. So unless there's something new, there's some smoking gun here we haven't seen, I think it's going to be a very, very difficult road. Mr. Smith has a very poor record on these political persecutions regarding Senator Edwards, as you know, and we've talked about this, and of course, former Governor McDonald of Virginia. So we have to see the details on this. Politically speaking, I have to say, every time this happens, it seems to favor, as your report indicated, the president. Not only his political allies have come to his defense, his political foes, if you want to call Governor DeSantis a foe, his more immediate and most substantial opponent, of course, attacked these indictments. So I think the politics is here, and the American people with each one of these indictments are more convinced that this is just a complete political circus.
All right, Joseph, let me talk to you about CNN. They're reporting that federal prosecutors interviewed officials in all of these battleground states where there was these, fake electors and talking about efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And we saw action there, too. The Michigan Attorney General, who's a Democrat, announced multiple felony charges against 16 fake electors who signed certificates falsely claiming that Trump won the election in 2020. And the former president is also facing the chance that, the real risk, that there's going to be more charges coming in Fulton County, Georgia soon. So you've got basically, you know, the court of public opinion, where Adolfo is talking about that, where a lot of Republicans feel like this is persecution. But then you have the court of law, where it seems like there's a lot of oncoming trains headed at the former president.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it seems like there's going to be one stacked upon the other, stacked upon the other. He's tied to the tracks. Whether or not the Republican base can get him off those tracks and untie him in time for the election remains to be seen. But I think that there's a couple things that are at play here. One of the through lines is that you have a scheme that would keep Donald Trump in power. And certainly one has to ask the question that with all these charges coming, I mean, a lot of this stuff can't be made up out of whole cloth. I mean, persecutions are one thing, but evidence is something else. And you've got testimony, you've got grand jury testimony, you've got the president's admissions himself that he called Brad Raffensperger, asking him to scrounge up some votes to help him over the finish line. You've got president's actions. It all adds up to a really bad look for anybody, much less somebody who a lot of people are very suspicious and who's managed to get away with a lot of things that a lot of people would have succumbed to political gravity by now and dropped out. And it is a very curious factor that he has not slipped at all on the right. What you have to remember is that a lot of these so-called campfires or smoke or whatever you want to call it, it adds up, and it adds to the weight that he's carrying with him. It adds to his public perception outside of the Republican Party, and I don't think that that's going to be good news for anybody if and when Donald Trump makes it out of the Republican primary. So a lot of oncoming trains, as you mentioned. Whether or not he'll survive is an open question. Whether or not he'll actually get convicted, it's another matter as well. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens if and when you put a former president of the United States on trial.
Rina, great to have you in the studio. It's been a lonely place during the pandemic.
Sure.
It's great to have somebody sitting across from me. Let me ask you about what we were just talking about. I mean, Joseph was saying, you know, like other candidates in the past, I mean, accused of this or that, you see pressure from the party saying, look, you've got to withdraw, and people do withdraw. If it was another candidate, would they even be viable to be running for office, let alone the presidency, other than Donald Trump?
Without a doubt, if there was somebody standing for the GOP primary or even just the general election, we would find them to be disqualified at this point if they were on their third indictment. Like Donald Trump, what we're seeing here is truly something that's historic in many ways, whether it was paying off an adult film star or harboring classified documents or now inciting a riot. Again, we have not seen the indictment this time. And so what we can venture to say here is, how does this feel really in the court of public opinion? And it's feeling, because that is American politics in a nutshell. We are about personalities more than we are about policies. We are about the way a candidate really makes us feel about the future. Donald Trump in the past made Americans feel very hopeful. In 2016, when he first was able to clear a pack of very established candidates, and established meaning these were people that had ascended the ranks of state government and were in hot federal seats, and he was able to say, I am the guy with no government experience, and I'm going to pull back the curtain on Washington. That mantra still sticks today, but with less people. We do have the empirical evidence that shows us that MAGA is dwindling, it is shrinking, and the midterms this past November is where we learned that the most.
Let me ask you about historians. How are they going to look back at this time? How will they look at the Trump era and what we're seeing today?
I think as the future students read about this moment in history, it will feel quite bombastic in many a way. Whether it is looking at this phrase of the year, it feels weaponization of the justice system, the weaponization of the justice system. These are words we've just never heard before, and it's because there are Democrats who feel that Hunter Biden shouldn't have suffered any consequences for keeping a gun, not paying taxes. And then there are Republicans who say that the government was easy on Hunter Biden. And then when it comes to Trump, how could we do this to a former president? You hear that out of the mouths of many Americans. But what impact is this going to have on 2024? That is something I think the future cannot even tell us, because what we really know right now is that American politics is forever changed. So students in the future who read about this era, they will say one thing: there were choices to be made, and those choices can be made by leaders on Capitol Hill. And we see from Speaker McCarthy, he's chosen to take a very, very clear path on this and to have Trump's back, though Trump is no longer in office and lost last time.
Jeff, you don't teach history, but you teach law. I want to get your thoughts on just that, teaching law students. And you see these attacks on the justice system and the legal system that are going on right now from politicians. I mean, what kind of damage does that do?
I believe that at this moment, we're at a crossroads as far as how our legal system is going to operate and how we are going to honor it. It's not just the Trump cases, although that is very significant. It's also what's happening with the Supreme Court and the things that are happening in Congress that are basically an attack on the justice systems. So it really is, at this point, a question of which way we're going to go. And I teach my students, I teach criminal procedure, which is the study of the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments. And I tell them that right now, everything that I'm teaching them could be gone by the wayside within the next couple of years, because things are going to change. I don't conflate what is happening with former President Trump with anything else. I don't think we should be looking at anything else, and because everything that has been mentioned by Adolfo are things that have nothing to do with whether Mr. Trump has committed a crime. And what I'm hearing from just about everybody who attacks in this way is they don't talk about whether Trump actually did the things he's accused of. They just want to conflate it and attack the justice system. And the problem is, when you attack the justice system, you are in fact attacking the Constitution, and you're attacking the way that we run our lives, and that is our respect for the rule of law, as opposed to, as Rina just put it, going with the personality and saying, I don't want to believe everything that I hear. I don't want to believe my eyes. I just want to stick with my guy. Well, and that's not the way the justice system works.
Okay, Adolfo, I want to give you a quick chance to respond, but we've got a lot of questions, so make it brief if you can.
All right. Well, that's a chilling statement by the law professor. And if that's not an authoritarian statement, I never know one that is. To say that you can't question the justice system in America and you can't question the prosecutor, the abuse of prosecutor. Let me finish. I didn't interrupt you. The prosecutor's discretion, which can be abused. You mentioned the Michigan case. Every one of these are Democrats. These are all partisans. I just mentioned Mr. Bragg. I guess Jeffrey's not concerned about Mr. Bragg's, how he came to the position he held, saying that he would go after a target. I guess that doesn't matter. And the fact is, the system can be weaponized. The system is rigged. I've been here 40 years. The Justice Department is prejudiced, just like the candidate, just like all the guests here, including Rina, who represents a small faction of the Republican Party. So the fact of the matter is, this is being said, the evidence. What evidence? You haven't seen anything. You've just seen allegations. You've already come to a conclusion. Statements like inciting a riot, okay, to march peacefully to the Capitol, that's inciting a riot? That's news to me. So I don't understand. The Brandenburg case, Professor, doesn't that say that there's First Amendment rights that you have?
Okay, Adolfo, I did mention be brief, and I think you kind of made your point, and you did say something about Rina. I want to give her a chance to respond, but I do have another question for Jeff in just a moment pertaining to the court case. But Rina, go ahead.
Like 56% of Republicans, Rina, support President Trump and growing. I don't know where you get the statistic that it's declining.
Adolfo, look at the midterms. His candidates were really poor. They lost their primaries.
We're talking about the primaries, aren't we?
And we would have had the Senate. The Republicans would have had the Senate.
Aren't you
not
talking
for
about
poor
now
candidate quality. You know, look at.
Aren't you talking about the primaries?
I'm talking
Where's
about.
this support today?
The general election.
Where you're going with this?
Where is his support among Republicans? Is you're a Republican in the primary?
You're spot on about that. You are spot on. He remains the standard bearer of the Republican Party. He polls the highest of everyone. But
then where do you get that his support is dwindling?
The MAGA faction is what I had stated was dwindling in support. There are not many people willing. There are more people willing to say they want to take a chance on someone else in polls about other candidates. But again, there's not reliable polling again at this point in the race that tells us.
Why is it unreliable? Why is it unreliable polling?
We don't have.
Okay, but we're not. Okay, Adolfo and Rina, I apologize, but we're actually talking about the court cases right now. So Adolfo, hold on for just a minute. I've got a question for Jeff. Jeff, we're going to have a traffic jam when it comes to court cases. Can you talk a little bit about what happened in the courtroom in Florida yesterday? Because Eileen Cannon seems like she's kind of disabused to the notion that this should actually take place after the presidential election, which is what the defense wants. But she also doesn't seem to favor what the prosecution wants, which is to have the case begin in December. Can you talk about the benefits of either of these timelines?
Oh, sure. The benefit to the timeline involving the prosecution is simply to set forth the case on a speedy basis. The case is really not going to take that long to try. People are coming up with length of time in the kind of case that's being presented. It's a very straightforward case. It probably will take less than 3 to 4 weeks to try. The prosecution will probably be done in less than 3 weeks themselves. So it can be done. There are holdups and there are ways to stall this off. The idea basically is that Mr. Trump has said, I am too busy running for president of the United States. I am too busy doing other things than to stand before the court and go to trial like every other American. So I don't see this going beyond the election. They're going to have to eat a date sometime in early of next year. I don't think that Judge Cannon is the kind of judge that I'm used to seeing in the Southern District of Florida, where I practiced, where it has a lightning docket. Cases don't last that long. They don't take that long. But she's not an experienced and she's not a strong judge. She is showing her inexperience and her inability. And that really is where the problem is down in Florida right now. It's with the judge, not with anything else.
Okay, Adolfo, let me ask you this question. We've mentioned it before. The former president is going to be fundraising off of these indictments. He's claiming that he's a shield for his supporters from a radical, corrupt government, kind of the points that you were making earlier. Here's some of what he had to say, followed by a rebuttal from former New Jersey Governor Christie. Let's listen.
Every time the radical left Democrats, Marxists, communists, and fascists indict me, I consider it to be a great badge of honor and courage. I'm doing it for you. I'm being indicted for you. Better me than you, right?
He's a liar and a coward. He's not getting indicted for anyone other than because of his own conduct. There's no other of the 200 million Americans he spoke about who illegally retained classified national secrets after being asked politely, quietly, and professionally for 18 months to voluntarily turn them back over after he left the White House. There's no other of those 200 million Americans who lied to their own lawyers about where those documents were. And there's none of those other 200 million Americans who lied to the prosecutors about it and flashed around documents regarding an Iranian war plan to people who didn't have the clearance to see them.
And Christie, of course, was once an ardent supporter of Trump. Now he's running against him. I want to get your thoughts on what he had to say.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, you're talking about a candidate who's polling less than 1%, and questionable whether he'll make the debate. He represents the Rina faction of the Republican Party, which is less than 1%. So that's the first thing.
That's
Second,
inaccurate.
Next time
you have
on
no evidence of 1%.
Next time on, yes, it is.
No, you have no evidence. Cite your sources.
I have all the polling data.
Then name the data, please. Take that time to name the data.
You need to run on this program all of the statements of the leading opponents of President Trump within the Republican Party that are absolutely on his side, including statements made recently by Governor DeSantis. Not two outliers who are Governor Christie and Governor Hutchinson. That's number one. Secondly, this constant standard that every Trump appointee, every Trump judge, remember the professor says we have to respect the judicial system. We can't attack it. She's a lightweight. She's a lightweight. Every Trump appointee is a problem.
Adolfo, and I don't do that to every single member of the bench that was appointed by Trump. In fact, I complimented them in the past.
Isn't a problem.
So that's just not true. You don't know what you're talking about.
Political hack in New York. You have a prosecutor who is persecuting President Trump, and you have a judge whose wife is an activist against President Trump. You're not questioning his motivations. His being a lightweight in New York, or I haven't seen you question any Trump.
Adolfo, though, the question was, what about Chris Christie's points?
Right.
But what are Governor Christie's point? We've heard these points. This is the point of the opposition. This is the point of Democrats. This is the allegations that are being made. For one thing, there's constant reference to this document. First of all, that's not one of the documents that was retrieved by the Justice Department of the 131 documents. I'm not sure that there is that document. We've never seen it. We've seen an audio tape. I don't know if that was a newspaper clipping, if it was a classified or unclassified or
there
not.
were photos, there were records, there's a statement by the National Archives. There's been all kinds of people have been
that document has not been recovered.
There's official records.
Adolfo, you've had your chance. Let's listen to what Joseph has to say. Joseph?
That document has not been recovered.
Basically, I respect Adolfo's passion, but he's dead wrong on a lot of points here. I mean, it's not like this stuff was made out of thin air. You can't use the justice system to create cases unless you're going against, like, I don't know, the Panthers or something like that. But that's not the standard. And you have an entire country that's observing this case. You have Trump supporters who are suggesting that this was a bad move, this was wrong to do, and that the Justice Department has to run its course. You can't make up stuff out of thin air, and despite your passion and despite your perspective, you're wrong, and there's no two ways about that.
And Rina,
Mike, can I jump in here?
Rina, I want to give Rina a chance to chime in on one other thing.
Rina,
the Biden campaign just released a new political ad, which has a kind of an unusual proponent of some of the things that he's done. Let's watch this ad, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Joe Biden had the largest public investment in social infrastructure and environmental programs that is actually finishing what FDR started, that LBJ expanded on, and Joe Biden is attempting to complete. Programs to address education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, labor unions. And he still is working on it.
Hardly the stinging indictment she'd want, but about 20 seconds. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as a former political operative, wow, brilliantly done. It was really wise of them to use a sitting Republican congresswoman's words against her, essentially, and for them, more so for them, because what Joe Biden is really trying to do is show that he has accomplished so much. Legislatively, he is painting himself, and it's been said many times over, that he has the most legislative accomplishments of any sitting U.S. president. And so what I think, whether we disagree or not, what we have to look at is what are our commanders-in-chief getting done for us? And now, if Trump wants another go at the White House, which he clearly has carved out a road for and is polling quite well with most Republicans in doing, is saying that I'm the one that can take you back to economic prosperity. There are many Americans who don't still feel great about this economy, despite inflation cooling and record job numbers. So, unemployment being down, you can say it all you want until you're blue in the face, Biden administration. What you've got here is a tough case to sell to the American public. And I think if we're looking at a Biden-Trump rematch again, both parties have to come to terms with the reality here. Gen Z delivered the White House for Joe Biden. Who's going to deliver the White House for Republicans?
Well, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for joining us in studio. And I want to thank our guests who've joined us remotely. Appreciate it. Great discussion. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for watching.